Hi everyone, I was just going to try to make a quick music video showing some scriptures and how they seem to be pointing to the year 2018 for the fulfillment of Pentecost, the very first Pentecost at Mount Sinai, how it seems to be pointing to a fulfillment in 2018. And so I was just going to show some scriptures originally, but then towards the end of it I had a light bulb moment where I think I understand now how this all relates to the Revelation 12 sign and the Great Pyramid of Giza and the book of Esther. So I'm going to go ahead and try to explain it instead of just showing it in a music video, but I'm going to go ahead and show you the scriptures first. Okay, so when you go to the book of Exodus chapter 19, which is where it recorded the very first Pentecost at Mount Sinai when Moses gave the law to the Israelites. And if you go to verse 16, this is where it says, "So it came about on the third day when it was morning that there were thunder and lightning, flashes, and a thick cloud upon the mountain, and a very loud trumpet, so loud so that all the people who were in the camp trembled." Okay, then when you go to verse 17, it says, "And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain," or at the nether part of the mountain. And of course, this is what the 8-year-old boy from Sweden saw in his vision. He saw the people standing at the foot of the mountain. Okay, then when you get to verse 18, and so this is from 16, 17 to 18, so this is 3 verses later, it says, "And on Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly." Okay, and then I was going to show some other scriptures like Exodus 20:18, where it talks about it again, and it says, "All the people witnessed the thunderings and the lightning flashes and the sound of the trumpet, and they trembled and stood afar off." So it's mentioned again in Exodus 20:18, which looks like the year 2018. Okay, so this was the first trumpet when the voice of God was heard on Mount Sinai. And I've shown this table before where you put in last trump, Pentecost. It comes up in Exodus 19, where you had the first trumpet. It's going through to verses 17 and 18, where God meets the people, and they stood at the nether part of the mountain, and then Jehovah descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. So you have that coming up in this table that, as I've mentioned before, it looks like Mount Sinai, because the nether part of the mountain is located where the nether part of the mountain would be. And this is in a table that reads last trump and Pentecost, and you see the first part of the word Pentecost forming the top of the mountain. So you see that the mountain is flat at the top, and this forms the exact shape of the traditional Mount Sinai, which is located in the Sinai Peninsula. Okay, and I'll just show you an image so you can see what it looks like. And as you can see, this mountain is located in Egypt. The Sinai Peninsula is now considered to be part of Egypt, but you can see how it slopes and makes an indentation, and it's flat at the top and slopes again. Just like this table, you can see it slopes up, makes an indentation, it's flat at the top, slopes again. And then here you have the nether part of the mountain, which is the bottom of the mountain where the people stood. And again, this is what the 8-year-old boy in Sweden saw in his vision. And then I've explained before that when you put in first trump in Pentecost, it actually comes up where you would actually have the last trump, because it comes up in John 8:2, which is 28 backwards, and this is where John saw 7 angels stand before God, and there were given unto them 7 trumpets. So these are the 7 trumpets that are about to be blown in the book of Revelation. So this would be the last trump. The 7th trumpet is the last trump. And so the angels began to blow the trumpets, and then when the second angel sounded, which comes up in verse 8, so you have John 8:8, then you have, as it were, a mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and a third part of the sea became as blood. I believe this mountain represents Jesus coming back. Because as I've shown before in my Nibiru table, when you put in the words Nibiru, heaven, and year, and you see the word Nibiru coming up, straight up and down, and then above that you have the words avenger of blood, but it makes the word heaven because of the abacus effect. So you have that at the top, and then you have the avenger of blood again at the bottom. And of course Jesus is the avenger of blood, just as Natan said in his testimony that when Jesus, or when the Messiah comes back, he's going to avenge all the blood that was spilled in Israel and all over the world, I would add. And then over here it says for judgment. And so this was coming up in the book of Joshua, which means Jesus, Yeshua, in verses 24, which looks like 2014, through 28, which looks like 2018. And when you put in just the word Nibiru, it comes up in just verses 27, which looks like 2017, and 28, which looks like 2018. Okay, so I believe the last trump represents the first trump. As you can see here, first trump, Pentecost, comes up where the last trump would be, where the angels begin to sound the 7 trumpets, and then this culminates in Revelation 11, which I'll show you in a little bit. Okay, so when you go to Revelation 8:1, which looks like the number 18 backwards, this is where it says, when the Lamb opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I just want to say, I don't know if this half an hour represents half a year, because we're halfway into the year 2018. And then when you go to Revelation 8:2, which looks like 28 backwards, which again I believe that represents the year 2018, and this is what came up in my table where I put in first Pentecost. So over here it's showing the last Pentecost, and it says, and I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. So that comes up in Revelation 8:2, which looks like 2018, or the number 28 backwards. Okay, and then when you go to Revelation 11:18, which again this looks like 1118, and you have the number 18 here. So in verse 18 it says, the nations were filled with wrath, but now the time of your wrath has come. It is time to judge the dead and reward your servants, the prophets, as well as your holy people and all who fear your name, from the least to the greatest. It is time to destroy all who have caused destruction in the earth. And that comes up in 11:18. Okay, and so when you go to the very next verse, which is verse 19, that's when the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail, just like in the first Exodus in Exodus 19. But this starts out with verse 18, where God's wrath has come. Okay, and I'm just going to back up to verse 17 so you can see how this begins. It begins by saying, we give thee thanks, O Lord God Almighty, which art and wast and art to come, because thou hast taken to thee thy great power and hast reigned, and the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, and the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that thou should givest reward unto thy servants, the prophets and the saints, and them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth. And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings, and an earthquake and great hail, just like the first Exodus, or the first Pentecost in Exodus 19 and 2018. Okay, then when you go to Revelation 16, verses 17 and 18, again, you have the voices and the thunders and the lightnings. That's actually how I found all these verses. I was looking for voices, thunders, and lightnings. But starting from verse 17 is where it says, and the 7th angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, "It is done." So it's done here in verse 17. And then there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. And so this comes up in verse 18. Okay, and then the next one comes up in Psalms 77:18, and of course this would be the Hebrew year 77 that is ending, the Jubilee year, and then 2018 matches up with Hebrew year 5778. And so again you have the voice of thy thunder was in the heaven, the lightnings lightened the world, the earth trembled and shook. And I like how this image says looking back to the future. So this was talking about the first Pentecost, and it's looking to the future, and here you have 77 and 18. Okay, so what I was realizing was that it mentions the third day here from verses 16 through 18, which would make up 3 days. Just like I've explained before with the blood moons, you have that the veil of the temple was rent in twain as it transitioned from Nisan 14th through to the 15th, and then Jesus was placed in the tomb, and he was in the tomb for 3 days and 3 nights. So if you count 16, 17, and 18, then 18 would be the third day. And you can see the Passover week here as well. So if you count it from the 16th, you have the first, second, and third day being the 18th. Okay, so what I realized is that verse 16 matches up with 2016, and then verse 17 matches up with 2017, and then verse 18 matches up with 2018. And this is where you had the Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended, and the smoke as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. So this happens in verse 18. Okay, so what I realized is how this all ties in with the pyramid, because as I mentioned before, the height of the pyramid, or the estimated height with the capstone, is 5,776 inches. This also correlates with the year that's on the U.S. currency, which is 1776, because this is a veiled reference to the year 5776, because the calendars changed after 4,000 years from BC to AD, and so this would reflect the after the 4,000 years since Jesus came, and so 1776 represents 5776. Another thing that I noticed recently is that the height of the World Trade Center is 1776. And so I just happened to notice that in a video that was talking about tsunamis, and they had the height of the World Trade Center, and then I just recognized the number immediately, because I've talked about how this sign occurred on August 27th, 2016, which was the Hebrew year 5776, and this was the conjunction between Venus and Jupiter, and how it occurred right beneath the constellation Coma Berenices, and how this seems to form a triangle representing the pyramid, and this would be right in the center below the capstone. And this occurred on August 27th, 2016, which would have been the Hebrew year 5776. And I've also talked about how the word head, as in head of the corner, is the Strong's number in the Greek. It's Strong's number 2776, and I'll just show you that. See, the word head is 2776, and it's actually used 76 times, so I don't believe that's by accident. And so I don't believe it's by accident that the height of the World Trade Center is 1,776 inches, or the height of the Great Pyramid. I believe these all represent the head of the corner. Of course, the true head of the corner would be Jesus. He's the capstone that will be placed on the mountain, which is represented by Mount Sinai. But I'm going to have to continue in the next video, and I want to explain how this all relates to the third day and to the book of Esther. I believe these are all connected, as well as with the Great Pyramid of Giza. But I'll have to explain that in the next video. Thanks for watching, and God bless you.